as Julian has suffered sensory deprivation, I have suffered sensory overload.
Thank you very much for being with us. What is your name, sir?
My name's Ciaron OReilly.
And how long have you been in this spot for?
134 days, 24/7, but I started here 6.5 years ago when Julian entered the embassy.
6.5 years is how long Julian Assange has been in this embassy, held as a prisoner.
That's correct.
Is he to be released soon? And when I say released, it means vacated from this place and arrested by the police who are here with us today.
Well, I think he will be expelled by the new Ecuadorian President, Ciaron OReilly, and he'll be extracted either by the British SAS or by the London Metropolitan Police. There are indications a special branch are here in one of the apartments across the road. They were here quite visibly for a month in 2 vehicles. There's 17 security cameras in this alley where I'm living. The surveillance is very, very heavy.
Now the people have posed this question, what will we do? What will the people do and what will you do when Julian Assange is expelled from this public place?
Well,
will you be happy to have him in jail? You've spent 6 years here. What will you do is what we wish to know.
Okay, I've spent 2 years in prison myself for non-violent anti-war activity in the United States for disabling a B-52 bomber, on remand in Ireland for disabling a US Navy warplane en route to the invasion of Iraq, of which I was found not guilty of, and also for free speech violations in Australia and blockading nuclear warships.
So going back to the question I was posed, which was, what will you, sir, do? Because you have now become someone that is synonymous with the pain and suffering of that man. Everyone who has come to this embassy to support Julian Assange has seen you here. All the BBC, all the other reporters, Sky News and so on, have come and spoken to you. Tell us what you will do as one person, and I'll come to what others will do in a moment.
So, the 2 people I've met, one I live with, Philip Berrigan, who served 13 years in prison for non-violent anti-war resistance after being a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge, in which he killed a lot of people. He had a saying that if they come for the innocent without stepping over your body, cursed be your religion and your life. So I'm hoping to non-violently resist the expulsion and extraction of Julian Assange from this embassy that originally was a place of sanctuary under President Correa, that has now become a trap under President Ciaron OReilly, who seems to want Ecuador to be a colony of the United States again. And as an Irish Australian, I can say that both those countries unfortunately seek security in serving empire, and security is not to be found there. Scripture tells us it's to be found in peace and justice, in freedom, free expression and free speech. All that's been denied for Julian for the past year. He's become increasingly invisible, and by being a physical, visible presence out here, people utter the name Julian Assange as they walk past this building, and they would not be doing without that.
People utter the name Julian Assange indeed, but around the whole world people also utter a name with reverence and with respect, and that name is Jesus. And as I look to you, I see the crucifix here. Tell us, is this a part of your faith, what you are doing? I know the Muslims have something called perhaps jihad, which means in the Arabic translation, which is struggle. Thank you for that. You saved me.
Okay.
So the struggle for the pain and suffering, standing up for the weak, standing up for the oppressed. This is Islam. This is the true Islam. Is this the true Christianity or not?
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of co-opted versions of Islam and Buddhism and Christianity and New Age and everything. And you have what we'd say radical. And radical is not a scary word. It's not a word left over from the 1960s. It's a Latin word. And it means to return to the roots of what that Buddhism or Islam or Christianity was about. And we're taught about redemptive suffering, that there is, and the Gospels are written from the fringe of empire, from Nowheresville, from Nazareth, the fringe of the Roman Empire. This used to be the fringe of the Roman Empire, just where we're standing, and then it became the center of an empire, and now it's like an aircraft carrier for the United States. So it's very hard to be a Christian in the centre of empire. You know, it's really a spirituality born under empire, born under the Roman Empire. And we also have concepts of self-mortification, which gets a bad rap. But, you know, as Julian has suffered sensory deprivation, I have suffered sensory overload in the English winter, because I'm from a subtropical paradise of Brisbane and I'm not used to the cold. So in that state of traditional fasting and sleep deprivation, one can reach a certain kind of spiritual awareness about what is significant in life and what is transitory. Now, some things in life are eternal, like the truth, and Julian has never published anything untrue. Things like love and solidarity will last eternally. Things like empires, they come and go. The Romans came and went, the British are coming and going, and then of course the United States is in decline, China's on the rise. This is the rhythm of history. And so solidarity with Julian, people who cannot feel empathy for Julian are zombies. The definition of a zombie is someone who can't feel empathy for the other, whether the other be a different ethnicity, different orientation, different religion. And what we're seeing here, I think, in a Christian sense, is a slow-motion crucifixion of Julian Assange. And I've visited Julian in the embassy over the years, and this is sensory deprivation, no change in heat or cold, can't see more than 5 meters. And he's very, very resilient. And I know from my own prison experience, the only two things that let you, like the two places where man or humans are at their most barbaric is war and prison, right? And what sustains you in prison is your own spirituality. For some that is Islam, for some it's Buddhism, for some it's the pixies at the end of the garden. For me, I was born into Catholicism. And your spirituality, your sense of self and your integrity. And the other thing is the solidarity of others. To know that brothers and sisters on the outside of this building, on the outside of the jail you're in, are finding significance by your presence and your continued resistance. And every day of this 6.5 years, well, it's 8-9 years that he's been detained without charge. And that is a term called internment. And the British used that on Irish Catholics in the 70s in the north of Ireland. They used it on Germans and Italians. Even those who were fleeing Mussolini and Hitler were interned here in World War II. So that's detention without charge. So every day when he wakes up, he must make the choice to resist. And when I entered this alley, and it's a dead-end alley with 17 security cameras and special branch at the only exit, I was threatened by the Simungo's homeless team to use an ASBO to get rid of me from the area. So the next morning I decided they've got an ASBO for Hams Crescent. I'm moving off Hams Crescent and I moved into Landon Place. So
Seems
yeah.
like you beat the system there. As we conclude, tell us what you intend to do in the future. If they keep Julian Assange here, how long are you willing to stay here?
Well,
what is the ultimate goal for you?
I've learned quite a bit living here. Two things I learned. One was that speculation causes stress, and I just have to deal with what's real and what I know and understand. The other thing is disappointment is born of expectation. So if I had any expectations of Amnesty International to do their job, I would be disappointed. But Amnesty were co-opted by the United States in the first Gulf War and got into bed with them. And they have no intention of getting out of bed with the United States. And Stop the War Coalition, you know, this man and Chelsea Manning are in trouble for exposing a war that 1.5 million people marched through the streets. When you march on an anti-war protest, you are inciting people like me to go to Shannon Airport to disable a US Navy warplane. You're inciting people in the military, and most anti-war resistance comes from within the military, like Chelsea Manning, like Ben Griffin, like Joshua Castile, to resist, to put down their weapons. And you're inciting publishers and journalists to risk their lives to expose the rich and powerful and war. And if you incite people, you're morally obligated to accompany them through the consequences of what you've incited them to do, whether that's through hospital or through the courts or through the prison system. So the abandonment of Julian Assange by those 1.5 million people who marched here on February the 15th, 2003, is no reflection on Julian Assange. The abandonment of Chelsea Manning by Stop the War when Chelsea grew up in Wales is no reflection on Chelsea. It's a reflection on the nature of the society we have, the lack of solidarity, the lack of people being serious at the centre of empire, of stopping the killing of children in Yemen, of Iraq and Afghanistan. So,
we spoke to many people here on the streets. People seem to be apathetic. They seem to be, alongside that, pathetic. Alongside that, they were completely nonchalant to the pain and suffering, not only of Julian Assange, but others, as you rightly mentioned, Iraq, in Yemen, and in other Palestine and other countries out there. Tell us, what would your message be to those people who are viewing this with that type of thinking?
I don't want to be pessimistic. Like, I remember an anarchist punk rocker telling me in the 80s, never define anyone out of existence. They'd just say, you're only Muslim, or you're only Catholic, or you're only unemployed, or whatever. And the people who I expected to support my presence here, like old comrades and staff who have abandoned me here, but I've been surprised by, there's a Saudi corporate lawyer who gave me a blanket, who visits me with a puppy dog. There's Harrods security guards who are refugees from wars, from Algeria, from Bosnia, from all sorts of places. People you least expected. Everyone has a divine spark and a conscience, and they resonate with Julian. There are two former prisoners on the street who immediately resonate with Julian. And so you can never work out whether we believe the Holy Spirit will move, where people will resonate with the truth. And like my godson, Ben Griffin, was deployed in the SAS. He believed all the lies they told him. He joined the parachute regiment. He was then competed to get in the SAS, and they handed him to the Americans. He was under American command in Baghdad while the British were deployed in Basra, and he found himself kidnapping any Iraqi in a village from 16 to 60, and he had no contact with the anti-war movement, but he had a conscience, and he thought, I'm not a Nazi. And he went back to Hereford, expecting to be arrested, told his commanding officer, I'm not willing to serve under American command, I'm not willing to go back to Iraq. Now, he went on to start Veterans for Peace. There are now 500 ex-military working against war in this country. And so he'd be the least person you'd expect, the person who believed he was a true believer from 15 and competed to get into the SAS. And
just like Egg Boy, we thank you, and on behalf of the entire country, anyone who has any inkling of the pain and suffering that is going on in this world, we thank you, because people like you and people like Egg Boy are the ones who make that change, who can stand up against the injustice. This is the true faith of anyone. This is the true innate being of anyone on this earth. We have to stand up against injustice, and you not only have stood up, but you have stood up and been on the streets for the last 6.5+ years. For that, on behalf of the country, on behalf of the viewers, and on behalf of the owners of this channel, I thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again on this channel very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peace.